Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my weekly entertainment wrap-up for March 30th through April 5th. This week I read 3 books, I watched 2 shows, and I listened to 1 book. First this week I finished a true crime book called Finding Baby Holly. This has a very long subtitle, so I'm just going to read it. Lost to a Cult, Surviving My Parents' Murders, and Saved by Prayer by Holly Marie. So imagine this, you're in your early 40s, you've had an up and down type of life. It was pretty good, there were some rough patches, you've got some kids, you've got a husband you adore, everything seems to be going just fine, but you're really busy at work today when these officers stop by and tell you that you've actually been missing for 40 years. That was exactly the case that Holly found herself in. You see, Holly's always known that she was adopted. In fact, she grew up with her dad being a pastor, and he would often tell the story of these 3 robed women just coming to his church and trying to surrender this baby to him, and how he ended up actually adopting this baby. Although this situation sounded sketchy, it also seemed a little bit legitimate because they had her birth certificate and everything, and one of the women claimed that she was the mother of the child. Whether or not that's true, we still don't know to this day. But basically, Holly grew up knowing that her parents dropped her off so that they could go join a cult. However, the actual story is a little bit different, and we still to this day don't have all of the pieces of the story. What we do know, however, is shortly after Holly was given to her adoptive dad, her parents both died. Unfortunately, their bodies were unidentified for decades until the use of genetic genealogy. And once their bodies were finally identified and their families were notified, everyone went, well, what happened to baby Holly? Because when these 2 disappeared, they had a very young daughter. It's an absolutely fascinating story, so if you're at all interested in learning from the perspective of somebody who just didn't know that they were missing for 40 years, I can recommend it. Next, I finished my first read for the Disability Readathon, and that's I Felt Myself Slipping. This is about these 2 characters, Coda and Riley, and they meet doing gymnastics. Recently, Riley moved to town. Her and her dad used to live in California, but I think they had to move because of his new job. And Coda is instantly interested in being her friend and maybe also has a little bit of a crush on her. The thing is, to be able to speak to Riley, especially during practices when Riley doesn't wear her hearing aids, she needs to learn some ASL from her coach. So she does. In talking about her new friend with her family, her dad actually points out that when he was getting to know her mom, they would write back and forth in this journal because his English wasn't up to par at that point, because he and his family had immigrated to the States. So in addition to taking ASL classes, Coda also talks to Riley in this journal. This graphic novel is about them learning about each other, but then also about gymnastics and what's going on in that, because Riley is very, very good. Coda is also very good. They both want to qualify to be able to go on to the Olympics. But when things are high pressure, sometimes you can just freak yourself out and think, all I'm going to do is hurt myself if I do this, which is not perfect if you're trying to throw yourself around. I really enjoyed reading this. Also, the experience of reading this was fun because I brought actually these 3 books I'm going to be talking about to the bar with me, because I was finishing off the first one, then I read the second one, then I read some of the third one, and it's actually just really fun for me to just go and sit at a bar and drink a beer, maybe eat a pizza and read my books. And it's funny how often the waitresses at this bar are always like, what are you reading? Oh, it's a graphic novel? Cool, I really like that style, and things like that, so that's just fun. The other physical book I read is a novella called Murder by Memory. This one takes place on a Generation ship, and all of a sudden our ship's detective is woken up in a body that is not her own to solve a murder. As it turns out, all of the people on this ship have these things called memory books, so basically everything they remember is recorded, and when their current body gives out on them, it takes a couple of days and then they are uploaded into a new body. This is because this journey to wherever the ship is going to take about 1,000 years, and we're on year about 300. So all of these people have lived several lifetimes by this point. But now it appears that somebody on the ship might be deleting memory books, which means that person is gone now. And our ship's detective Dorothy now has to figure out what's going on. This one was very short and had such an interesting concept to it. My one big thing is I would have liked to be able to try to figure out what was going on. There weren't quite enough breadcrumbs for me, but that's possibly just a me problem. This, however, is the first in a series, and I would be very interested to see what else goes on with this woman because she seems really cool. Also, this whole concept of this project is just fascinating to me, and there's so many things that are introduced in this first book that are just really fun to think about, such as everybody replicates their food, but it can only be replicated from that person's memory, so if they don't remember it correctly, it's going to come out a little bit weird. And even their beverages come down to memory. The bartenders will mix these different things that are like, I want a summer's storm, and then you'll drink it and you'll think of a summer's storm on Earth. And it's just a way of bolstering people's memories. All of it was just really cool. On to the shows I watched this week, the first one being Vera. The last time I talked to you, I was still in the first series, and by the end of this week, I was halfway through the 5th series. Which means I'm far enough in the show that a major character just left between seasons because his character, like, got a promotion. Which was weird enough because I noticed at the beginning of the 5th series that, oh, the title sequence is a little bit different. They've used some shots from more updated episodes, not necessarily episodes from the first season, and then it switches into the actual episode, and then I was like, wait, there's only 2 people named really in the title sequence, and one of them is not there. What happened to Joe? So that was a little bit jarring for me. However, watching the show is a little bit different than watching it in Shetland in that there are so many people that I recognize while watching this show, whereas with Shetland, I think there were only 2 actors that I recognized from other things. In this one, I recognize people from Shetland, from Game of Thrones, from Stranger Things, from Doctor Who, from Downton Abbey. So I've had to use IMDb a lot more while watching Vera than when I was watching Shetland. Which, if you're new here, the only reason I'm comparing these 2 shows, Shetland and Vera, is because Shetland was the show that I most recently went all the way through. I watched all 9 series in about 3 weeks. And coincidentally, both of these shows are based on books by the same author. I didn't know that going into Vera until I saw it in the title sequence, and I was like, oh, Anne Cleves also wrote the books that this is based on. Alright. I'm pretty sure I mentioned this last week, but what I really like about this show is every episode is an hour and a half, so basically every episode is just one case, and it's basically a movie-length situation, but with characters you already know. And I really like getting character development, so you'll see one character come in on an episode, and it seemed like that character did really, really well, so a few episodes later that character now actually just works for this department, whereas sometimes you'll get a new character and that person's a little bit of a red shirt. It happens. I was also talking about this the other day with my aunt, but one of the things I really like about Vera as a character is she has this, not master gesture because it's not something she's actively doing, but something that is really prevalent in her costume design, is it seems that there's always one side of her collar that's flipped up, and that just really embodies the type of character she is, and I love it every time I see it. I'm just really enjoying the show, which makes me happy that I have several more seasons to go through. Coffee break because my voice sounds weird. The other show I watched this week is Jet Lag the Game, which I'm not going to tell you about because they're nearing the end of the game. I think by the end of this episode they were basically at the end of day 4 of a 6-day thing. And because I watch it on Nebula, it's basically like watching it a week ahead of time, so this episode isn't actually up on YouTube yet. So I'm not going to tell you what happened, but certain seeds that were planted in the first couple of days are definitely flowering today. The show continues to be a really fun concept, and if you like travel content, I don't know why you're not already watching it. There are so many series up on YouTube, just go do it. The book I listened to this week is called Watch Out From Her. This is a mystery thriller, and we get these 2 different perspectives and 2 different time frames. My problem is I can remember that one of them was named Holly because, you know, another book I talked about this week, the person was also named Holly, but now I can't remember the name of the other character. Which is super annoying because I can remember the name of other side characters, but I can't remember the other character's name, which also embodies her character a little bit. That's weird. Okay, here's the setup. We have 2 different time frames, the beginning of the summer and the end of the summer going into the fall. At the beginning of the summer, this girl named Holly, who is in med school and has these really big family obligations, finds out that she's going to be babysitting for this family. They only have the one kid, Jake, but he's very hyperactive, and his mom basically needs a little bit of a break so she can work on her own project, because for the past 5 or 6 years she's just been doing all of the domestic duties and all of the parenting pretty much while her husband is off doing whatever he does for work, and he decided that she needs some time to herself. We get this first timeline from Holly's perspective where she's realizing that something is a little bit weird with the dad in this family, but we don't really know what. The other perspective we get at the end of the summer and going into the fall is the mother. And we find out that her and her family actually moved from Vancouver to Toronto for a new job for her husband. And something happened with the babysitter that was quite untoward, and they just don't really want Jake to talk about her anymore, even though she was basically his best friend. They get to the new house in Toronto that's been supplied by his new job for 6 months while they're looking for their own place, and weird things start happening. And the mother keeps wondering if Holly has somehow followed them. as we go back and forth, you're trying to figure out what sinister things have happened so they've gotten to this point. And I had a really good time with this. There were many layers to this. There were things going on with the different characters that not everybody was privy to. And at points you're wondering which one of these characters is crossing more boundaries than the other when doing the creepiest things. Because it's not readily apparent, and I love that. That's it for this week. If you've read, watched, or listened to any of these, let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. If you don't feel like leaving a comment but want to make sure that I know you were here, just leave me an emoji or a smiley face if you happen to be on your keyboard. Some people have asked if there's a way to financially support this channel, so I set up a Ko-fi account, which is a digital tipping service. The link for that, as always, is down below. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!